You're driving a 2024 SUV, wearing the latest designer tech, and your Instagram looks like a continuous vacation. But at 2 a.m., you're staring at your bank account wondering how you're going to make it to next month. We're living in an era where looking rich is making us poor. Today, we're exposing the invisible price tag of keeping up appearances and how it's silently sabotaging your financial freedom. Here's the thing. That scenario isn't about someone reckless. It's not about someone who never finished school, never got a promotion, or never tried to be responsible with money. That scenario is about the person who did everything right on paper, got the degree, took the job, got the raise, and still feels like the walls are closing in every single month. My name is Ely, and I spend way too much time thinking about how people in the US experience money psychologically. If you're someone who earns a normal income, maybe even more than you used to, but still doesn't feel financially secure, hit subscribe and give this video a thumbs up. Because what we're going to talk about today isn't budgeting tips or investment strategies. It's the invisible psychological machinery running in the background of your financial life, quietly deciding how you feel about money, how you spend it, and why earning more hasn't fixed the problem the way you thought it would. Let's start with a number. According to a 2023 report from the Federal Reserve, roughly 37% of American adults said they would struggle to cover an unexpected $400 expense. $400. Not a medical emergency, not a car transmission, a $400 surprise. Now here's what makes that number jarring. It doesn't just describe people who are broke. It includes people with jobs, with benefits, with salaries that sound decent on paper. People who, from the outside, look like they have it together. So the obvious question is, where's the money going? Now you might be thinking, well, everything is more expensive. And that's true. It genuinely is. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the cost of shelter, transportation, and food has risen significantly faster than wage growth over the past decade. The average American household now spends roughly 33% of its income on housing alone. Throw in a car payment. The average new car payment in the US hit $735 a month in 2023. Add groceries, utilities, insurance, a phone plan, and the occasional medical bill that insurance didn't fully cover, and the math starts to look very uncomfortable very quickly. That part is real. That part is not in your head. But here's what most people don't realize. The cost of living squeeze is only half the story. The other half is something no spreadsheet can fully capture, and it's been with us long before inflation became a dinner table conversation. It's the cost of looking like you're fine. Think about what it actually means to keep up appearances in America today. It's not just about vanity. It's about survival, social survival. It's about the subtle but constant pressure to signal that you're doing okay, that you're keeping up, that you belong to whatever version of normal your social circle has defined. And in the age of social media, that circle has expanded from your neighborhood to the entire internet. The comparison game used to be played against your neighbors. Now it's played against a highlight reel of millions. This is where it gets interesting, because psychologists have a name for this phenomenon. It's called social comparison theory, and it was first introduced by Leon Festinger back in 1954. The basic idea is that human beings are hardwired to evaluate their own lives by comparing themselves to others. We can't really help it. It's a survival mechanism that made sense when we lived in small tribes and needed to gauge our standing in the group. The problem is that mechanism wasn't built for a world of Instagram, LinkedIn, and TikTok, where you're constantly exposed to the most polished, curated, and often financially inflated version of how other people live. Now look, this isn't about blaming social media for everything. That would be too simple. But the data is worth taking seriously. According to the American Psychological Association, money is consistently ranked as the #1 source of stress for Americans, above work, relationships, and health concerns. And research published in the journal Social Psychological and Personality Science found that upward social comparisons, meaning comparing yourself to people who appear to be doing better than you, are directly linked to increased spending and decreased savings rates. In plain language, when you see someone living a lifestyle that looks better than yours, your brain interprets that as a threat. Not a physical threat, but a social one. And your response, almost automatically, is to close that gap, sometimes by working harder, but very often by spending. Let's get specific about what that looks like in the real world, because theory only means so much without the numbers. Imagine someone, let's call him Marcus, who earns $65,000 a year working in operations for a mid-sized company in a city like Atlanta or Denver. By most national measures, that's a solid income. But Marcus lives in a neighborhood where most of his colleagues and neighbors are earning $85,000 to $100,000. His friends drive newer cars. His coworkers take vacations he sees on their social media. His girlfriend's family has a home they own. Marcus rents a 2-bedroom apartment. Marcus is not irresponsible. He's not frivolous. But over time, almost without realizing it, his spending starts to drift upward. He upgrades his car because the old one felt embarrassing at work events. He goes on a trip he can't quite afford because turning it down felt like admitting something. He buys clothes he doesn't need because showing up to certain situations in the wrong outfit carries a social cost he doesn't want to pay. None of these decisions feel irrational in the moment. Each one has a logical justification. But the cumulative effect is that Marcus is spending approximately $800 to $1,200 a month on things that are primarily serving one purpose: managing how other people perceive him. That's roughly $10,000 to $14,000 a year. Gone. Not on experiences that genuinely enriched his life. Not on investments that build his future. On appearances. On the performance of doing fine. Now here's the part that makes this particularly difficult to solve. The pressure doesn't go away when the income goes up. If anything, it escalates. This is a well-documented psychological pattern called lifestyle inflation, or more technically, hedonic adaptation. The idea is simple. When income rises, expectations rise with it. The things that used to feel like luxuries become the new baseline. The $50 dinner feels normal. The weekend trip becomes routine. The upgrade to the nicer apartment feels necessary because your income supports it now. And before the raise has even had a chance to meaningfully improve your financial position, you've already filled in the gap with new spending. The Federal Reserve's data confirms this pattern. Despite decades of real wage growth at the median, slow, inconsistent, but real, the personal savings rate in the United States has declined dramatically since the 1970s. Americans saved close to 17% of their disposable income in 1975. By 2023, that figure had dropped to somewhere between 3% and 5% depending on the month. People are not poorer in absolute terms, but they're spending a larger and larger share of what they earn, and a significant chunk of that spending is driven not by need, not even by genuine want, but by social signaling. Here's a metaphor that might make this clearer. Imagine you're running on a treadmill. Every time you speed up, every time your income increases, the belt speeds up with it. You're working harder. You're moving faster. But you're not actually going anywhere. The treadmill is the social expectation machine. And the only way to make real forward progress is to either slow the belt down or to step off entirely and walk in a direction you actually chose. Now you might be thinking, okay, Eli, this is all very interesting, but what am I supposed to do about it? I can't just stop existing in society. I can't show up to client meetings looking like I haven't slept or drive a rusted-out car to my niece's graduation. The social pressure is real. The consequences are real. And that's a fair pushback. Completely fair. Nobody is suggesting that appearances don't matter at all, or that you should simply stop caring what anyone thinks. That's not realistic, and frankly, it ignores legitimate social dynamics that affect careers, relationships, and opportunities. The point isn't to reject appearances entirely. The point is to become conscious of when the cost of maintaining an appearance exceeds its actual value to your life, and to start making those choices deliberately rather than by default. Because here's the thing, most of the spending that goes toward keeping up appearances is not conscious. It doesn't feel like a decision. It feels like a requirement. It feels like something you just have to do. And that's precisely where the psychological damage is hiding. There's a concept in behavioral economics called pain of paying. Research by Dražen Prelec and Duncan Simister at MIT found that when the friction of payment is removed, when you swipe a card, tap a phone, or click a checkout button, the psychological discomfort associated with spending decreases dramatically. You feel the purchase. You don't really feel the cost. This is one reason why the average American household carries over $6,000 in credit card debt, according to the Federal Reserve Bank of New York. Not because people are bad at math, but because the system is designed to make spending feel weightless right up until the moment it isn't. Now combine that with constant social comparison, lifestyle inflation, and the very human desire to feel like you belong. And you have a recipe for chronic financial anxiety that no raise can cure. Because the raise doesn't change the psychology. It just raises the stakes. So let's talk about what actually helps. Not in a hand-wavy way. Concretely, the first thing is to separate your financial identity from your social identity. This sounds abstract, but it has a very practical application. Take a serious look at the spending categories in your life that are primarily performing a function for others rather than for you. Not all of them. Some social spending is genuinely worth it. But identify the ones where the return on your well-being is low. Where you're spending $200 on a dinner out because it's what the group does, and you'd have been just as happy, maybe happier, cooking at home. Where you're leasing a car that costs $600 a month because the alternative felt like admitting defeat. The second thing is to build what some researchers call a financial buffer with almost religious discipline. Not an emergency fund in the abstract sense, but a specific dollar amount that you keep untouched and that exists for one purpose: to make you feel safe. Because here's what financial anxiety really is. It's the absence of a sense of safety. And no amount of income can manufacture that safety if the income is fully consumed every month. Even $1,500 sitting in a separate account, not a lot by most standards, has been shown in behavioral research to significantly reduce financial stress and impulsive spending. Safety changes how you make decisions. It quiets the noise. The third thing is to audit the gap between what your life actually costs and what your life's appearances cost. That gap is the number. That's the invisible price tag. For some people, it's $300 a month. For others, it's $2,000. But until you measure it, it stays invisible. And invisible costs are the most dangerous kind because they never trigger the alarm that would make you stop and reconsider. Here's what most people don't realize. The financial stress they feel isn't primarily caused by what they earn. It's caused by the distance between what they earn and what they've committed to spending, including the spending they do unconsciously in service of an image. Close that gap, even partially, and the anxiety starts to loosen its grip. Not because the world got cheaper, not because the cost of living dropped, but because the math finally has some room to breathe. There's a version of financial stability that doesn't require earning six figures. It doesn't require an inheritance, a windfall, or a viral moment. It requires something harder in some ways and simpler in others: the willingness to decide. Actually decide, consciously, what your life is supposed to look like. Not what it's supposed to look like to everyone else. What it needs to look like to feel like yours. That's not a small thing. In a culture that profits enormously from your insecurity, from your desire to look successful, to look current, to look like you belong, choosing your own definition of enough is genuinely countercultural. It will feel uncomfortable at first. It might make certain people in your life uneasy. But the alternative is staying on that treadmill indefinitely, running faster every year, and arriving at 60 with the same anxiety you had at 30, just in a nicer pair of shoes. The invisible cost of keeping up appearances is not just financial. It's the chronic low-grade stress of performing a version of yourself you can't quite afford. It's the 2 a.m. math session. It's the gap between the life you're showing and the life you're living. And it's worth asking, seriously worth asking, whether the audience that performance is for is actually paying attention, and whether their approval, if you even got it, would make you feel the way you're hoping it will. Most of the time, the answer is no. And that's the most important financial insight in this entire video. Take care of the math. But more importantly, take care of the psychology underneath it. Because that's where this was always happening.